this video, I'll be talking about Piaget's cognitive development stages. He has 4 of them. And for each of these, you need to know what is present, what changes in the stage, what is not present, and the age range for each stage. The first stage is the sensory motor stage. Sensory motor stage is from birth to 2 years of age. The easiest way to think about it is to look at the title, sensory motor. They focus a lot on sensations and motor development in the first couple of years. This is when kids are always trying to reach for things, learning how to walk, learning how to interact with their environment. Everything's going in their mouths. They're trying to combine their sensations with their movement. Infants know the world mostly in terms of their sensory and motor activities. One thing that develops at the beginning of the stage by about 6 months of age is object permanence. Object permanence is the awareness that things continue to exist even when not perceived. When you do not have object permanence in the first 6 months of life, that means if you don't see something, it does not exist to you anymore. So if a child gets left with a babysitter and the parents take off, the child will probably not get really upset because once the parents are out of the room, the kid can't remember the parents exist and thus cannot think, oh my goodness, my mother, my father is not here. If you have a baby who really wants to play with your keys and you don't want the kid to touch the keys, it's great if the child does not have object permanence yet, because all you have to do is hide the keys behind your back and the child will stop wanting to play with them. Once the keys are gone, they don't exist anymore. So object permanence develops during the sensory motor stage. That's the first one. The next stage is called the pre-operational stage. The pre-operational stage occurs from 2 to 6 to 7 years old. And this is when the child learns to use language but can't perform the mental operations of concrete logic. An operation is doing a mental activity in your head. During the pre-operational stage, kids are not capable of that. They can't reverse their actions in their head. They can't think forward about what would happen. It's not working strictly in a mental capacity. They really need to act it out to figure it out. One thing that you do not see in the pre-operational stage is conservation. Once you have conservation, you are out of the pre-operational stage. Conservation is the principle that properties such as mass, volume, and number remain the same despite changes in shape. If you give a 5-year-old a cookie and you break it in half, the child will now think that it is 2 cookies twice as much. It's still the same amount of cookie, even though you've broken it in half. If you have 5 pennies lined up really tightly in a row, and then you spread them out so they take up more space, it's still the same number of pennies, but a pre-operational child will think he now has more pennies because it takes up more space. He'll think the number has changed because the shape, because the look is different. If you pour water from a tall, thin glass to a short, fat glass, a pre-operational child will think that there is now less water because it looks shorter. That is a lack of conservation. Something else that goes on in this stage is that children have egocentrism. This is something that decreases during this stage. Egocentrism is the difficulty in taking another's perspective. If you have a pre-operational egocentric child and they are talking to someone on the phone, potentially they could say, "Do you like the color of my shirt?" The person on the phone cannot tell what shirt they're wearing. The egocentric child does not realize that, though. If the egocentric kid knows it, everybody knows it. The final thing that develops during this stage, usually by about 5 years of age, is theory of mind. Theory of mind is people's ideas about their own and others' mental states. It's about their feelings, perceptions, and thoughts, and the behaviors those might predict. Once you have theory of mind, you're able to think about what is in someone else's mind. You're able to tell if somebody else knows something and you know it or not. So, for example, theory of mind, one famous test for this is playing a game of pick which hand. So if you hide a marble in one of your hands and you have the child who does not have theory of mind pick it, he or she will play the game just fine. The problem is if you ask the child to put the marble in his or her hand to hide it from you, the kid won't be able to. And for someone without a theory of mind, they won't realize what your thoughts are, that even if that kid knows where the marble is, you don't know where the marble is. Another famous test for this, and there's a video on the playlist, is the M&M test. Can you tell that someone else has a false belief, that you know something somebody else doesn't? If you do not have theory of mind, you can't realize that other people don't know things that you know. So these really develop together, although theory of mind is a little more complex. And autism is one disorder that has a main symptom of a lack of theory of mind. If you are autistic, it is very hard, if not impossible, for you to tell what other people's thoughts are, what other people would perceive, what other people would know or feel. So that's the pre-operational stage. The next stage is concrete operational. The concrete operational stage starts about 6 or 7 when the pre-operational ends and goes until about 11, sometimes 12. Once you show conservation, you are now in the concrete operational stage. You are able to perform mental operations in concrete manners, following things step by step, following a pattern, those sorts of mental operations. And that's really what you need to know for concrete operational. After that, about 11 or 12 years of age is when you start the formal operational stage. The formal operational stage goes from 11 or 12 through the rest of your life. And this is when people begin to think logically about abstract concepts. This is when you're able to think about ambiguity, ambivalence, having two different feelings about one thing, being able to understand potential outcomes versus logical, if you do this, then that will occur events. This is when you're able to think hypothetically and to deduce what the potential options are. So it is very abstract, very formal thinking versus just very logical thinking. And these are Piaget's 4 stages of cognitive development.